welcome everybody to our conversation today on women in leadership, brought to you by Braggin Right and the Unapologetic Audacity, and we're going to get started. Okay, so we have three speakers today. First, Sarah Filicetti, who is a global program manager and has focuses in tech and advertising. Jenna Starkey, who is a sales account manager in the SaaS industry. And then lastly, myself, Morgan McCaughey, and I am the owner and CEO of Braggin Right. So feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn if you haven't already, and we're going to go ahead and jump into today's conversation. Okay, so our focus today is about women leaders. And one of these quotes that hit us really hard was in 2023, for the first time in history, women CEOs led about 10% of Fortune 500 companies. This is groundbreaking in that there's never been such a high percentage of women leaders with it at this high level. However, this is still a really small percent of all leaders of Fortune 500 companies. I'd love to bring on Jenna and Sarah now, and let's chat a little bit. What is your reaction to this statistic?
Yeah, I mean, some of the best leaders that I've had have happened to be women. And I think it's just because I feel like they're just more detail oriented. They lead with empathy. They give you a space to kind of talk about things. And the difference that I really find between female leaders and male leaders, at least in my personal experience, is that they tend to focus on more of a servant leadership kind of style, meaning that they come in and then they just remove the blocks in order for you to do your job, which I think is just, that's always made them better leaders because they already know that you can do the job. Their role is just to remove them so you continue to keep doing what you need to do.
Absolutely agree. And 10% is really exciting to see, but it's also really sad that it's exciting to see. Because if you think of the amount of women in the workforce, how teeny tiny of a number that really is, it's good that we're making changes, but it's needs to keep happening. It needs to be more. Like we said, we can see here, one of the other stats from the article that we really liked was the fact that organizations with at least 30% in women in leadership are 12 times more likely to be in the top 20% of financial performance, which is also a huge deal and not something to be taken lightly, or it's not a small number there. And if we only have 10% in CEOs, where's that disconnect? How do we bridge that gap? How do we, start that pipeline to create more women CEOs?
Yeah, one of the sentiments that we also had here was that women or the female leaders show up more efficiently than their male counterparts at every level and at every age. I'd love to hear from you ladies. What are some ways that you've seen female leaders show up effectively in the workplace?
I've seen them kind of show up when I feel like they really go to bat more for their people than what male leaders do, right? Like I cannot tell you the amount of times that I have literally asked for advocacy from my male leaders and not gotten it. And then when I have asked my women leaders, like, hey, this is what I really need to do, I just feel like that they show up more for women, and especially when they hire. I feel like they hire for that person's skills, not just for what they can actually do. And they hire them specifically for what they bring to the teams. And so I feel like they kind of have a better belief in the people that they hire. So that's why they like to remove these blocks, because they understand and see their potential.
And they're leading based on their values and what the purpose is, as opposed to what the assumption is of what should happen or what has been the status quo. It's what's actually going to be best for the team, for the company, for the organization. And so I think that is kind of breaking the old ways of doing things, of just following along what they're supposed to do. And this is how we create that change and make things bigger and better. And not only for the company, but for the people that work there as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I found really interesting when I was researching servant leadership is that the term was actually coined by a man in like the 70s. And what struck me as really interesting is, women seem to practice servant leadership naturally through the compassion and empathy that they bring to the table, whereas servant leadership is kind of this newer mantra that men have chanted amongst themselves, almost in appropriation of the styles of leadership that women demonstrate naturally. I thought that was really interesting. So I'm going to take us forward now. Because I want to, we would be remiss not to call out all of our sisters. We are 3 white women presenting today, and we have much privilege that we don't even know about. And that's why it's so important to recognize the situations that everyone is in. If anybody's familiar with the broken rung, that is actually a theory that women are held back at that first level to management. So where men start to progress in their careers, fewer women are really encouraged and empowered to make that first step into management. And this really has impacts down the line. We see this is where we start seeing women compress and really be promoted at a much lower rate the higher you go up in a company. So for every 100 men who are promoted from an entry-level position to manager, only 87 white women are promoted from that same level up to manager. But this number actually gets worse for other demographic groups. So for every 100 white men, 82 women of color are promoted from entry level to manager, and 75 Latina women are promoted to that same level. So what we can see here is that this broken rung problem and this problem of getting women into leadership is not just it's a women's problem, but it's a worse problem for women of color and women of minorities. And that is very important for us to acknowledge and support everybody in moving forward and lifting women of all types into leadership positions. I want to take us now to this book, Women Who Lead. Jenna, you brought this book to our attention and really shared with us some of the sentiments that women leaders are leading in different ways. And some of those ways are not always represented in kind of like management expectations when it comes to promotion and really executive level appearance. Why don't you give us a rundown of some of your key takeaways from Women Who Lead?
Yeah. So one of the things that really struck me is how men are often judged for their performance and women are judged on their style and personality, right? Especially if you were just a strong person. I know personally, I have been called combative when I have been just assertive, and after I was told that I couldn't critically think by a male boss. And I did not think that that was a very fair assumption. And oftentimes I know that we have all seen these memes where it's like, what's the difference between being a bitch and being a leader? And it's that your gender, right? So I really just kind of wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit and these different stories that we have. I know, Sarah, you've had some issues with that too, right? And you Morgan, as well.
Absolutely. One of the many times I've experienced this at a tech company a few years ago, I was the only female in an all managers meeting. And going around, there's different questions asked by the head of our department, and no one really had the answer. I had raised my hand more than once to give my answer, knowing full well that I had the data to back it up. I knew what it meant to our team, what it meant for any forward progress for our department. And it got to the point, like, it was almost laughable. It's really terrible to look back on now. At one point, because no one would listen to me in the room, I literally stood on my chair and got everyone's attention. Might have scared them a little bit because they didn't expect me to do something like that. But for the love of God, I had no other way of getting their attention or getting anyone to listen to me. And once I finally was up there, again, they're taken a little back, but I had the answer they were looking for. I gave it to them in a clear and concise way. I feel like they're all surprised that I was the one that had the answer that they were looking for, and also knew how that related to where things were happening on our roadmap, what dependencies would happen down the line because of this, and what different effects that would happen with other departments as well. And it's really sad that it took that kind of action, because again, not the most professional, but after that, thought that maybe I'd get a little bit more respect and attention in meetings, but it's like nothing changed. And it was a really, really frustrating time for me. And I'm very glad I'm not there in that toxic workplace anymore, but it was definitely an eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah. Sarah, you hit on this theme of really being the only woman in the room. And that's theme actually shared amongst about 30% of women in the tech workforce, where they're experiencing really being the only woman in the room, the only female voice in the room. And that has repercussions when it comes to how you're seen, how you're heard, and the
Absolutely.
kind of sentiments that even your coworkers can have about you. I'd love to hear from you too. How have you kind of like navigated being the only woman in the room in the past?
Again, it's that fine line against between being combative and assertive. And like you said, being the only one in the room, the only woman in the room, any assumptions they have about women are on you, or anything that might be just something about you and your personality, they assume about everyone else that who's women that work with them. One of the things I did after that was any new roles that I've taken on, I've really looked at who's the team I'm going to be working with, who are the people that are going to be surrounded by. And my most recent role, I was actually so excited. Our group, our PMO group, our global program managers, it was the first time I went into a meeting and it was all female. And I, not only were the meetings more efficient, not only do we get a lot more stuff done, we communicated really well. We found creative solutions to problems where instead of just going with how things were going and seeing if we'd get different answers or different results, it was really inspiring, and it just showed me what I want out of my new role or my next position, and just how terrible it was that I was okay with going along with how things were in other places. And it just makes me wonder and fear for other women in these same positions, because I'm a little outspoken and some people might not be as much. And so to be able to put your foot down and really take a stand against it, it can be scary, especially if, again, you are the only female in the room and it's a bunch of loud, powerful men all around you. How do you get your foot in edgewise, or, try and get a word in when you can, or get anyone to listen to you? It's a really frustrating thing, especially when you don't have any female leaders around you to look up to. And so I think that's something that would have helped me a lot in that position, was having someone, even if not someone directly above me, but someone else just higher up to look to ask them how they navigated it within the company, what they've done to help change the company culture, and what we could do going forward and bring in more women leadership. I think that's really important too. Knowing what we know, being able to pass that on to other people and women that come into the positions we've had.
Yeah. Jenna, do you have stories to share around being the only woman in the room?
Not so much about being the only woman in the room, just because, at pay scale, it was like more HRIS kind of stuff. I do know that when in a former career, when I worked in logistics, this was something that happened often, right? Because I was doing account management and I was working with a lot of truck drivers. And there was quite a few times where I was told that I was a stupid woman on the phone by a driver, right? Because clearly I couldn't know how to do my job because I have, lady parts. Which, led me to wanting to get out of logistics. It was so antiquated. It was so old. It was so, like people have been driving trucks for years. And so that's what kind of led me to get out of the field of logistics, even though I worked in it for 6 years. Because I had to realize that I wasn't stuck, that just because I started working out in this industry, that it, bought me my first house, that I didn't have to stay, that there could be something else where I could be heard a lot.
Yeah. And being heard and seen and valued for like what's in your head is so important and very difficult when you're the only woman in the room. And even when you are trying to present as a professional, that can be viewed by male counterparts as really even being lewd. I've had situations in the past where I actually worked for a manufacturing company that made Harley Davidson engines. And at the time, I was interviewing for the position, and I was dressed literally in a turtleneck, all the way down to my toes, in an opaque tight with a like long knee length dress. And was, as a part of our interview, was walked through the plant floor. Months after I had received this job and had been working it, my boss actually came to me and said, I'm so glad that I hired you and didn't actually listen to the plant floor manager. And I was like, oh, well, what had the plant floor manager said? And he had shared with me that he had been directed by the plant manager not to hire me because when I had walked through the plant floor, production had stopped, and I had really caused the plant to like stop operating. As I was walking through. And I was so frustrated by that sentiment that just because I was a young woman who was professionally dressed, it was viewed as threatening by the workers there. And just because I was qualified and could do the job, just the act of being a woman was distracting. And I think that that is something that we run into sometimes on a daily basis in our workplaces, depending on your work situation. So I just wanted to share that story as well. I'm going to continue on because let's talk about the new face of leadership. We've seen what leadership from men looks like, this kind of aggressive assertiveness, the momentum to the top, but we're really trying to rewrite the script around what leadership looks like and celebrate feminine leadership and celebrate women here. So Jenna, I'd really love to hear from you. What does this new face of female leadership look like?
Yeah. So the one that I kind of think of when I think about this is the founder of Bumble, which is Whitney Wolfe Herd. So when she was working at Tinder, she actually was let go and had a sexual harassment suit. And so she decided that she was going to leave and she founded Bumble. And so if you don't know what Bumble is, it's a dating app. But the caveat of that is that women are only allowed to send men or messages to men first. Men can't just be sending the messages. And so what this did was this flipped the power dynamic of dating back into women's hands and made her one of the youngest self-made female billionaires, right? And so one of the things that they talk about in When Women Lead is how women tend to turn genuine grievances into entrepreneurial grit because women tend to see a problem within society that needs to be fixed or something that's kind of bothered them and have flipped it kind of on its head. So that's why I kind of like to shout out like Whitney Wolfe Herd, because, you know, she kind of represents this, it was kind of coined like this aggressive feminism because men don't really know what to do with that when you have like women of, you know, that have substance that come out and speak that actually look good too and are probably smarter than the way that they look, and then they are able to kind of flip and shift this dynamic in order to create something better. Either it's a safe space or a product of more value to be able to provide it to society. And so I really love this quote that she has down here at the bottom. The power lunch is no longer just for men. We all deserve a seat at the table. And I'm not sure how many women here have also noticed too, like even when it comes to just like the regular dynamics of leadership, how often men are invited out to go for after work drinks, or they're invited to go, you know, go golfing with them, right? And they just tend to miss that with us because, you know, men in power like to be around other men around them that either remind them of them when they were little, right? Or when they were younger and they were starting to come up, and they tend to kind of gravitate towards that because like kind of tends to go with like, right? So having this new dynamic of women leaders who are coming in and kind of shaking the game up is really exciting.
Yeah. I wanted to share a personal story here, Jenna, that I kind of only put together when we were talking about this slide. And the sentiment of like women turning a personal grievance into a business opportunity just struck so true with me because that is exactly what I am doing with Braggin Right. I have had many negative experiences in the workplace, from harassment to being passed over for promotions to being placed on a PIP when the company really just wanted my salary. And all of those reasons, when they ultimately led to me being laid off in December, I was so frustrated with the status quo and with the experiences that I had received as an employee from many businesses, and ended up starting my own business of Braggin Right to empower and encourage other people to be seen and heard as a part of their career journeys. And I think one of the ways that we do that is through clearly documenting our experiences in ways that can't be ignored. So that's why I've created services like job description writing and resume renovations, so that I can support other people in shouting out their experiences so that they can't be ignored. Because as we know, remote workers in particularly are seen as invisible for companies now. It's harder than ever for us to be really recognized as a human being. We're kind of just a number on a spreadsheet, especially when we're just like a box on a computer. And so that's why it's so important for us to be able to like document and clearly explain our value and experiences and get paid appropriately for it. So that was my that was my little bit of a pitch. But I'm curious to hear, Sarah, any kind of like final thoughts on this new face of leadership?
I mean, it's exciting to see that there is change starting to happen. I also think one thing that we bring to the table as women is the way we build our relationships. And the more we can continue to do that, the more we can continue to uplift other women. Like I said, going against the grain, not just how things have always been. We're the ones that are going to get in there and be the movers, the shakers, the disruptors, and hopefully continue. I'm really excited to see where we keep going with it. So.
Yeah, me too. Awesome. Well, we're going to go ahead and transition. I'd love to hear from our wonderful audience and kind of open up the conversation here if you're interested. So, Sarah, Trinisha, please share with us, how have you seen women lead in the workplace?
I'm happy to speak up. So what's interesting is, to be honest, I feel like I have had some different experiences where I've actually been targeted by other women because they have played the game and have adopted misogyny in a way that suits them and services them. And when I don't, that's very threatening. And so when I look back on some of my leaders that have been women, it's really disheartening that I have not been supported like I have from male leaders in my life. I feel like I've been very fortunate to have really amazing male leadership that have been very supportive of me and have also challenged their internalized misogyny and have strived to learn and grow. So yeah, this has been very interesting for me to hear and kind of unpack. And I think that's a continued work that we need to do, is making sure that women support women.
Yeah.
Because very often I feel like that doesn't happen, unfortunately, for whatever reason, right?
Sarah, you are hitting on such an important topic here, and that is like toxic female bosses. And we actually didn't touch on that here today because we wanted to have a whole separate conversation about it. So thank you for bringing that into the room today. It is so frustrating when you have a person that is supposed to be your ally and instead they're dragging you down. And I've actually received some of the worst critiques and worst feedback from women bosses. So very much there with you in that sense. And I totally hear you in that we need allyship, and that looks like both men and women. It looks like all of us. I'm curious to hear, Jenna and Sarah, would you want to share your own stories of toxic female bosses?
I mean, I actually can relate to what Sarah's saying because we worked at the same company together, and I know exactly who she is speaking to. And it's one of those things where they will sell dirty deals and then they expect you to clean it all up. And then it seems like for me, the whole thing is that there is no accountability that they take. It's always somebody else who did the thing. That's the issue with it, right? And then they just try to spin it however they want to spin it, because they do uphold some of these systems of, quite frankly, like white supremacy and the patriarchy, right? And how they love to just toss people underneath the bus, right? And then if you speak up, then they silence you. So I definitely know where Sarah is coming from on that side of it.
Yeah. Sarah F., do you want to chime in at all?
I'm sure I do have things like that have happened to me in the past, but I don't think it's been as serious and or intentional as some of the other stories that you guys have had to share. But it is definitely an important topic and something I do think that we should continue to look into, and something that would be a great topic for one of our upcoming discussions, because I know a lot of people have had to deal with that, and it is not something we talk about as much.
Yeah, no worries. So as our last kind of comment here, we want to challenge our audience today to compliment a femme leader that you do respect, not those toxic bosses, but ladies don't get enough representation. So I just want to encourage everybody to go out this week and compliment a femme leader on a quality or leadership style that you appreciate and respect from them. And kind of with that, we're going to close it up. Thank you so much for joining, Tranisha. I think you're kind of our last stander here. But we do have a brand new website that's coming out. Or that is actively out. So go visit us at bragginright.com, see the career advancement services that we offer. You can find us pretty much everywhere at Braggin Right. And if you missed last week, the recording about ATS systems and your resume is up on YouTube. And this conversation will also be up on our YouTube channel. Feel free to reach out to us at bragginrightconsulting.com. You can also save 25% on any Braggin Right template or service when you use code ResumeReno25. And if you feel like providing us any feedback about this conversation today, you can pull out your phone and scan this code, and it'll take you to a Google form where you can provide feedback on both our conversation today, and if there's any topics that you would like for us to cover in the future, we would love to hear those so that we can keep the conversation going. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. Jenna, Sarah, thanks for your time, and I'll let you go. Have a lovely Wednesday.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.